We'll leave on Obata's words regarding what the team were striving for. You know, there are many different approaches you can take to game design. One approach, which we took in Street Fighter 3, is to design your game around unanswerables. I think with any game, players will search for the best tactic, the best strategy, like if X happens, then you should always do Y. If you do this here, you'll always win. There's competitive games like that, where the match is essentially a confrontation of theoretical knowledge that each player has built up. But Street Fighter 3 is a game that, by design, doesn't have a fixed answer to those questions. There is no best tactic. You can spend your whole life trying to find the perfect theoretical approach to a situation in SF3, but it will never be quite right. You always have to be reading your opponent in the moment. You can't just fall back on your theories. It's a game that lets you search for answers forever.
That's actually a really good quote. In fact, it's funny that is, and it's kind of true. What he is describing in that quote is quite literally emergent gameplay. You know, it's one of the things that makes Killer Instinct a great game. One of the things that makes a lot of the best classic fighting games like Melee and stuff like that extremely renowned and beloved, you know? And it's something that a lot of modern fighting games are missing. We talked about this like, 6 months to a year ago. Brian F did a video on it. It's funny because I used the exact same term like half a year ago. About half a year ago, I'm like, fighting games need more emergent gameplay. And emergent gameplay is essentially the hot buzzword that sandboxy games slash like battle royale has with random elements. Emergent gameplay, you know? Fighting games need more of that shit. Allow you to be more creative and aggressive with your creations and let them breed new creations, you know? And that's exactly what that quote is. That quote is the idea that there isn't hard solutions. There is not concrete solutions in every single way to this thing. And it's one thing that Street Fighter V, for the most part, really lacks. There's not a lot of emergent gameplay in Street Fighter V. It is very by the numbers. It is fun. I think it's very fun and it's very enjoyable, but it's very by the numbers, you know? And it's something that a lot of Guilty Gear players recently kind of complain about. Like, a lot of people say the exact same thing about Guilty Gear Strive, that there's not enough meter for more emergent gameplay to kick in, because the most emergent thing that happens in Guilty Gear is essentially, you know, the RC system. That's the most emergent shit there is. How do you create emergent gameplay when there is frame data? Decision making, brah. That's what you do. People look at a game like Third Strike or KI or Marvel 2 or even Melee, and they look at the speed of the game and how fast people are making decisions. And people are like, fuck, dude, how do people even play this game? Having a variety of options and then making the choices in those options constantly, and constantly having things to do is the thing that breeds emergent gameplay. What grows what emergent gameplay is. More options that characters have, the more freedom, the less limitations that your system mechanics provide, the more the player will be focused in solving those answers as you're playing the game. And it's something that I specifically talked about when we were chatting about DNF Duel. And DNF Duel is a game that it probably is going to get figured out pretty fast. However, it does have one really important thing to it. And I said this specific term. It feels loose. And some people are like, what the hell does that mean? For anyone that has jumped into fighting games over the past 5, 6, 7 years, that might be a very weird term. What do you mean loose? There is moments when I was playing a game like DNF Duel that it felt like they could have put limitations on stuff, right? For example, you can cancel any part of your normal into a special, and that special can be canceled into any other special. So at any point you can do it. And that's very loose. That's a very loose mechanic that allows for a lot of freedom of the player to do stuff. In a situation where you had a tight fighting game, you would specifically be only limited to cancel at the beginning part or the end part, right? You would have to cancel your moves at very specific moments or else it wouldn't work. The best example I can give in Street Fighter V is that characters could only use their V trigger or V skill off of certain moves, right? Off of some attacks. It felt very specifically designed that way, where they want you to use it in this way, and that is how we crafted it. We actually do not want you to find other ways because we have crafted the game around this experience. That's an example of a tight fighting game, right? Mortal Kombat 11 and many other games nowadays are kind of like that, where they're designed very tight. Back in the day, I hate saying that, but back in the day, a lot of fighting games were designed with very loose mechanics, which allow the player to essentially figure out, where do I want to do this? Does the game allow me to do this? Can I do this? Inherently, most games that have, like, for example, somebody asked, is Skullgirls a loose game? Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely it is, dude. The approach that you have with characters in Skullgirls, here's the loosest goddamn thing I can tell you that Skullgirls has. Skullgirls lets you choose your assist, but it lets you choose the individual thing you want your assist to be. That is loose as fuck, dude. That is insanely, that is a very loose mechanic that people will just figure shit out, come up with solutions and solve stuff on the fly. It's a reason why people love Uniest, yes, like Under Night. It's one of the things people loved about Under Night. It's a very loose game that allows for a lot of adjustment and change on the fly, and not just one way to play a character. Where you ever run into a fighting game and it's very clear that this person is playing like Akuma, and then this person is playing Akuma, and they play the character almost entirely different. That's an example of a loose fighting game. Given the amount of expression within the systems to allow that looseness to happen, where it's like, holy shit, you can do this that way? Wow, that's nuts. Another great example is Battle for the Grid. Yeah, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid has an insanely loose mechanic that lets people figure shit out. It has an assist system, right? Assist systems and team-based games already have a very heavy feeling of looseness to them. But in Battle for the Grid, you can tag your opponent in, and literally at like any part of your assist doing an action, you can press the tag button again, or whatever the action button was, and you could switch control to that character. So even though you're back here shooting shit and doing stuff, and the Red Ranger comes in and zips across the screen, you could switch control to the other character as he flipped across the screen. I was like, what? That is insanely jarring. That's like, that'll take a long time to get used to, and it is very jarring and very daunting, but you know what it is? It's loose. It allows for a ridiculous amount of expression and player expression, and allows you to figure shit out as it goes. The example used in this video from Matt McMuscles, from like the lead producer of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, is the epitome of it. That is the idea behind what I talked about like 6-7 months ago, what is emergent gameplay in fighting games. And the last fighting game that came out that truly had like an absolute emergent gameplay element, where it's like, dude, like, you can't give people this much freedom. This is gonna get crazy. And guess what? It does get crazy, and people do figure out crazy stuff, and it's up to the devs to figure that shit out. The last one that really did that, little game called Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite's tag system is so fucking loose, it's nuts. You're constantly just trying to discover some new crazy bullshit that you can do. Granted, all games that are loose, Melee, Marvel 2, like Third Strike, all of these games that are relatively loose are going to get solved. You know what I mean? They're going to get to a point where they are eventually figured out and optimized. That is just the nature of all games, right? People will figure out the best strategies for this situation. But here's the difference. The difference between a fighting game that is loose/emergent and one that is essentially solved/tight is the fact that the games that are solved and tight get figured out really quick. Like, not even that far into the game's public perspective, people figure out like optimized combos and really good shit almost immediately. And it feels like everyone's kind of playing the same game, right? Or everyone's playing characters the same way. You get a loose game or a more emergent game, that discovery process, the process of you learning a character and playing things in your own unique way, will go years. It won't be like the first few months, right? It will not be the first few months. It will go absolutely a hell of a long time, to the point where even shit in Smash Brothers Melee, way beyond the scope of the internet, right? Way beyond the scope of the information age, allowing people way more access to info than it was in the 90s. Games like Street Fighter 3 Third Strike and Marvel vs. Capcom 2, right? Very loose games, Smash Brothers Melee. People are still figuring shit out. People are still discovering things and elements and glitches and crazy stuff that characters can do in that game. Well, like, holy crap, like, still figuring it out. So that's very important, right? To me, that's a thing that fighting games have been a little over-designed, in my personal opinion, over the last few years, over the last like 4 to 5 years, to where we are now, where I'm very much hoping that developers allow for more emergent / loose gameplay mechanics in the future for fighting games. This has been a very on-point topic of me personally, since a very specific game came out, and it was Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V, from our perspective of the betas, if not pre-launch versions, to the eventual release of it, that was where I truly noticed this first start happening. This was like the awakening moment where it's like, so wait a minute, why are we taking away things from all these characters from the previous game? Why are we taking away things from the previous versions of the game? And now the characters are doing even less stuff than they were doing from 2 versions ago. Like, what is going on? To the point where by the time the game came out, I just wasn't nearly as excited for Street Fighter V's release. That was the first moment I realized, like, I didn't give it the term emergent gameplay. That was, the term emergent gameplay has popped up in the industry over the past couple of years, especially because of like Fortnite and Battle Royale randomness. The element of randomness is like loot that is random, that can make you buff and better, is an emergent gameplay element that will be different for every single game, you know? It'll be different. You have all these options and how you approach those options and use those options. That's where this buzz term comes from. But it is actually true. The fact that other people are making videos on this is great, because yes, it is true. Fighting games do need more emergent gameplay elements. They need more mechanics that allow people to express themselves with their game engine, much less their characters, that give enough unique freedom and interactions that might be different in a game-to-game situation. I don't want to go to somebody's stream and watch somebody play a character, and then every other stream, people play the character the exact same way. That is not emergent at all. That is very specifically tight and by design. And that's not a bad thing. A lot of people have grown up with fighting games like that over the previous years, and some fighting games can be really fun that way. But you can tell, like, the first few, I'm not even kidding when I say this. I played Mortal Kombat 11 at the very first reveal event was at, and I was able to pull the conclusion that this is a very tight and controlled game. There's very little looseness to this within the first 30 minutes. At that point, I was worried. At that point, I'm like, this just might not be the Mortal Kombat for me. I'm gonna keep giving it a shot, and I'm gonna keep trying it, but I don't know. And I remember immediately telling everyone about that, and everyone thought I was being a piece of shit. But I didn't think the game was bad. I just felt that this is lacking the things that I really love about the fighting games that I personally love, if not even Mortal Kombat X, which is emergent to some degree. Mortal Kombat X is such a fast game that requires you to make such crazy decisions so quickly that it does feel like a very emergent, very loose fighting game. All I'm saying is that I hope for the future of fighting games that more emergent / loose gameplay elements are introduced. And the good thing is that we're already being introduced to something like that, which is DNF Duel. DNF Duel immediately has some elements to its combat, which I don't think are perfect, but are very fun, are super fun at the start. And you know why it's fun? You know why it's fun to a lot of people that are old heads of fighting games? Why they immediately like, damn, this game's doing some cool shit. The reason it is because DNF Duel felt loose, like it was giving the player a lot of opportunities to do weird and crazy shit. And guess what? Most of that weird and crazy shit was powerful. Is it going to get figured out and optimized really fast? Absolutely, it is. But it makes a lot of sense why the game feels that way, because the last big fighting game that developer did was a little game called Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And yeah, it starts to make a lot of sense.